Good afternoon, everybody, and you're very, very welcome to UCD, this webinar on the MA in Art History, Collections and Curating. Thank you very, very much for joining us. We hope you're well wherever you are. We appreciate you taking time out to be here with us today. We're going to talk to you for probably about 20-25 minutes. I'm going to hand over very soon to Course Director, Associate Professor Conor Lucey, who's going to give you insights into the course and an overview of the course and the types of careers that graduates go on to look at. And then we're going to speak with Grace O'Boyle, who studied this MA. She's going to tell you about her perspective on the course and what it has led her to in her career. So thank you very, very much for joining us again. I think we pretty much have everyone here. I'd encourage you to please send any questions that you have through the Q&A or the chat function, bottom center of the screen. We want to hear from you. We want to hear where you are, what your questions are. We're here to answer them for you. And then secondly, just to point out how the next semester is looking. So right now in UCD, we're working towards a start date of the 21st of September. That's when the next academic year will begin. And it's very likely that we're going to be looking at blended learning, so a mix of online and face-to-face classroom teaching. So we're finalising the details of that in line with the national instructions around social distancing and 1 or 2 metres. So we'll communicate with all applicants in our systems once details are finalised. So it's just to give you that piece of information, because I know that's very important for you to know. But the start of the next semester will be, and the next academic year is the 21st of September, and that has been confirmed. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Associate Professor Conor Lucey. Conor.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name's Conor Lucey. I'm Programme Director of the MA in Art History, Collections and Curating, and this will be our 3rd year of the programme, 2020-2021. And I'm just going to run through a little bit of what's involved and how it operates. I've just got a few slides to talk to you about. So the course is a 1-year taught MA. It's a 1 year full-time or 2 years part-time. So it provides advanced postgraduate academic training in history of art. So the discipline is history of art at its root. But we have a special focus in this course on collections and curatorial practice. And this arose out of discussions with our cohort in our undergraduate program and looking around and seeing what was available to postgraduate students in Ireland. It offers the opportunity then to hone skills in the interpretation, critique and analysis of works of art and architecture, and developing the knowledge and capacity to further pursue careers in academic research, writing and curatorship. So that's a sort of 3-pronged approach, if you like, that this course focuses on. We're preparing students to either pursue their studies further into academia or to pursue their studies further into developing a professional career in museums and the gallery sector. So just to alert you to the fact that, you know, we have a long-standing tradition of postgraduate study in UCD, but this course is relatively new and it's the only course of its kind in Ireland. And many of our graduates go on to careers as curators, educators, administrators, and so on. And you'll hear from one of our recent successes, Grace O'Boyle, momentarily. I'd also just point out another recent success, a student who went from our program into a 4-year full PhD studentship at Trinity College. And we have students who've gone on to work in various capacities. We have very good links with, or very good success rate with placing people in the Guggenheim Museum in Venice. Another recent graduate, Kate O'Donoghue, who is now a curator at the Walker Gallery in Liverpool. So we have a very good success rate. Our department is the largest art history department in Ireland. And so we have the widest range of expertise available to students. So just to give you a quick rundown of what the course involves, it is divided into a couple of different parts. So there's 2 core modules, approaches to art history and the seminar in curating and collections. The Approaches to Art History is an advanced methodology course where we introduce students to the different ways in which we can think about and write about history of art and when I say history of art, that includes design, material culture, architecture, and so on. It's a very broad church. And the seminar on curating and collections is the other core module. And that introduces students to the different practical and theoretical approaches to curating that exist. And that course takes place in the major institutions across the city, across Dublin, but also a little bit further afield. And in these images here, you can see in the bottom there, for example, is the student visiting the newly opened Museum of Literature Ireland. And that's the director on the far left there, Simon O'Connor, talking to students about how the kind of, I suppose, intellectual apparatus for setting up a museum like this, and then the practical requirements of it. So that is part of the kind of way in which this course is taught. It's very much introducing students to the key curators, keepers of collections, directors, and so on. We use all of our professional networks in this capacity. And so students get to see behind the scenes, they get to understand how collections are managed, how exhibitions are organized. And both of these courses demand a lot of students as well. We expect a full kind of engagement in terms of participation, reading and presenting texts, often kind of complex ideas within a group setting. So there's a lot of peer-to-peer learning involved in this as well. And then there's a further 3 taught modules drawn from the following representative selection, which you may be able to see on the slide. It's very small on my screen. But that would include, for example, a module on museums and modernity, looking at the evolution of the modern museum from the 19th century to today. Another module that will be running in this coming year is the institutional and private collecting in the Netherlands in the early modern period, so this sort of 17th and early 18th centuries. So the course at a glance then is the sort of 3 major components. The taught modules, which provide introductions to methods in research and curating and advanced research topics in art history. We also have a field trip, which normally takes place in the middle of the 2nd trimester, so usually in the middle of March, where we visit a European city and we focus on visiting national institutions and collections. And then the final part, which is in many ways the kind of lion's share of the credits in terms of the structure of the program, is a dissertation, which provides scope for research into other areas of study that may or may not be covered in the taught modules. And this is really the opportunity for students to develop their own research interest and research project, which can be really on any aspect of art and design and architecture that appeals to them. So I'm currently supervising a student who's looking at what's called sloppy craft in textile art, and I'm also supervising a student who's looking at Yves Saint Laurent's 1988 fashion collection. We have students looking at all kinds of topics that, as I said, may or may not relate to the course topics that are taught, but which really encourage students to develop their own kind of interest, and I suppose in a way to define their further professional development in the field. And many of the very best dissertations, year in and year out, go on to become publications. So, for example, a recent student, Frances Coulter, has published her MA dissertation in the Burlington magazine, which is one of the most notable journals of record. And she's now going on to do a PhD. So it's also a kind of a pathway to further study. So it's a 1-year full-time or 2-year part-time. And we'll be commencing in September, towards the end of September. The teaching takes place on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Our cohort is usually between 10 and 15 students. So we're actually looking forward to having as much face-to-face teaching as possible. And obviously, as Emer explained, that will likely change over time. We have to kind of follow the national guidelines in terms of best practice. The course takes place in UCD, in the Belfield campus, but also in our campus in St. Stephen's Green, Newman House, and around the cultural institutions across the city. Just to alert you to the other kind of further in detailed information you'll find on our school webpage. This is the final slide. I just wanted to draw your attention to our Art History MA blog. UCDarthistoryma.wordpress.com, and here we invite students to write a short overview of their dissertation, and we published that on our blog. And it's a good way of finding out. I mean, they're written in a conversational style, so students are encouraged to read those and familiarize themselves with the kind of process of writing a dissertation, the different kind of pitfalls that might occur over time, and also just to get a sense of what it is to take on a project of this nature. And that's all I have to say for the moment, and I'll hand back to you, Emer.
Thank you very much, Conor. That was really informative. You covered an awful lot of ground there. Thank you so much. And lovely to see the reference to Molly on this very special Blooms Day. That looked
Indeed.
like a fun behind the scenes tour. So thank you very much for all of that. I'm going to bring in Grace, if that's okay. Grace, how are you doing? You're good. Thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you here. And I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about your background and how you came across the course in UCD and what it was like for you.
Yeah, so I did my BA in Trinity in art history and sociology, and I knew I was very interested in art history, and I knew that I wanted to pursue a career, but I really didn't see a course in Ireland that I was drawn to. So I took a year out in between my graduating from Trinity, and I kind of traveled, and I spent some time in New York and went to loads of museums, and that even further validated that I wanted to do art history. And I came across the course and two other girls actually who had done art history in Trinity had also applied for the course. It seemed kind of fitting. We all went in that trajectory, and I really liked that there was an emphasis on art history, but also your own practice working in a museum or as a curator or even as a collector. So I think for me, I was drawn to the practical element as well. So maintaining the art history research, but then also having a look at the industry and how you can get into it and how you can make a career in it. So that's what drew me to the course.
What was the transition for you like, going from undergraduate in one university, moving to postgraduate in UCD?
Yeah, I found they were quite different. I found UCD, I found actually the department was a little bit closer, and that was good for me. I'm definitely more of a people person, and I like the fact that we had kind of smaller classes. I definitely got to know everyone in the course. The facilities are brilliant, the library is amazing, and actually now in my line of work I'm using the special collections that are in UCD quite a lot for research. And the folklore archive as well. So the facilities in UCD I find were amazing, and there's some really great special collections there. So yeah, I found the transition really good, definitely different. But I did find that UCD is really connected, really open. All the lectures are really accessible and really up for chatting. So it was great.
And can you tell us a little bit about the connections that you mentioned there? What sort of places did you get to see that maybe ordinarily you wouldn't have got to see, or the people you got to meet in working in this area?
Yeah, so Conor mentioned earlier on just in the slideshow that with the course we do visits to different institutions around the city, and then you also do the trip away, and you go outside the city as well. But one of the visits that we did actually was to the National Gallery of Ireland. And we went to the ESB CSIA, which is the Centre for the Study of Irish Art. And it was actually there that I kind of clocked that I was really interested in the Centre for the Study of Irish Art. And we were given a tour by a curator called Donal Maguire, who actually ended up, who is my boss now. So it's really interesting. I had clocked it was probably one of the most interesting visits that we'd went on. And I ended up using their research facilities throughout my time in the module. So it was so beneficial actually seeing people working in the industry, and you also got to see your resources and how to use them properly. And so that kind of cemented a train of thought that eventually helped me get the job that I have now. So.
And can you talk me through the kinds of people that you met on the course?
Yeah, so we met loads of people working in lots of kind of different areas. So we met a curator in Emma, called Rachel Gilbourne, and she was amazing. We spoke with her. We spoke with the chair of the RHA. We spoke with Simon O'Connor, the director of Molly, as well. We met loads of different people, and they all have different backgrounds, and it's really interesting hearing how they get into the industry. And they all come from very varied backgrounds, which is great. And so that experience is so practical, and it really kind of affirms that there is an industry there that wants people in it, and you just kind of have to maintain your interest and keep pushing towards the different areas. So it was a mix of educators, curators, those maybe working in a more commercial element. So it was a great mix of people that we met.
And what about the students? What kind of students are on the course? What sort of colleagues were you studying alongside? And what sorts of things are they doing now?
Yeah, so I made loads of really good friends. Two of my really good friends from the course were actually both from the States. So I wouldn't have met them probably otherwise. My friend Hillary, she's based in Martha's Vineyard, but has been working outside New York for the last year, working actually in the education department in a museum there. And then Connor actually mentioned one of the other girls in my course, Aoife, who is now doing a PhD in Trinity. So I actually see her sometimes as well. We're working around the same area, which is really nice. So lots of people from lots of different backgrounds, not just art history, and from all around, which is great, and all around Ireland and, you know, internationally as well. So, and they all seem to be doing good. Yeah.
That's wonderful to hear. So you kind of build up a network of people who have a shared passion and shared interests. And can I ask, looking back to when you were planning your master's education and when you were deciding to undertake this course, what sort of advice would you give to people gathered with us here today, and even to yourself looking back at that time in your life?
I would say definitely like immerse yourself in it. It's an amazing course. It's so enjoyable. I find people who go into art history really do have a passion for it, because it, I guess, can be viewed as quite niche. So usually anyone who's coming into it has a really strong interest in it anyway. So my advice would be immerse yourself in it every time that you go to a visit. You know, make sure to ask a question and be engaged with the people that you're speaking with, and take note of you know, the resources and kind of make the most of them. But I wouldn't do anything differently from the course. It was amazing. It was such a great year to kind of bridge the gap between doing an MA or a BA and then moving into the professional world. I felt it really actually restored confidence in me to go out and actually find a job in it. So it was amazing kind of period. So I wouldn't do anything differently. Just my advice would be to really immerse yourself in the course and give it your all.
Great. And one final question, if I may. In your current role, describe what you're doing and how, you know, the academics that you learned in the course have really helped you in your current position.
Yeah, so as I said, I'm working in the ESB Centre for the Study of Irish Art, which is in the National Gallery, and there's so much from the course that influences my job now. It's great. So loads of my job now, it's kind of mixed, but there could be tours with, it could be board members, or it could be secondary school students, and then sometimes third level students as well. So engaging with them is usually actually a lot of art historical content, which is what I've learned to research really well through the course. And even simple things like resources, like knowing where to go online, knowing where to go in UCD or around the city to get your information. And that research element is huge through the MA, and that really kind of influences my job now. And I think also there's a module that we did where we looked at kind of the theoretical underpinnings of curating. And though that module really taught me to think outside the box with how we display art and objects and how they can be viewed and engaged with by the public. So those are really cemented with me now, and I use them constantly as reference points. And I even use old readings as reference points as well. So it definitely influences my job.
That's great. Thank you very much for all of those insights. Really useful. Conor, if I could come back to you,
Yes.
just have a question here. I was wondering, how do you go about becoming a curator through this course? Great question, I thought.
Well, that's a difficult one to answer.
I know.
There are certainly opportunities. I mean, there's always opportunities that museums and galleries offer. Sometimes it's an internship, sometimes it's a fellowship. Some of these are paid, some of these are unpaid, and it's very difficult to unpack all of that. Mm-hmm. What I would say is that this course gives students a bit of a head start in terms of the kind of education we provide them with. And as I mentioned, you know, we've managed to place students in a number of positions. And you know, I mean, there's various different ways you can work in a museum. There's very different ways you can work as a curator. And I think if you're going to work, if your ambition is to work in some of the major international institutions or the big names, to be honest, I think most curators will have a subject specialism at PhD level. But this kind of course is designed to help students identify the particular professional path they want to follow, and that's I suppose that's how I would answer that question. There's lots of different routes into it, you know, and I think when you learn about that and learn about ways in which you can find your way into, it might be the education sector in a museum or a gallery, it might be a subject specialism, it might be involved in front of house and so on.
And another question, what would this course be highly beneficial for a career in an auction house?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I suppose like all of these things, having the kind of understanding of the broader field and having advanced research skills, understanding, as Grace mentioned there, the different ways in which exhibitions can be curated and displayed and so on, all of that would feed into a position in an auction house. There's certainly, you know, we even just this year, we get emails from Adams, from White's, these are Dublin-based auction houses looking for students, looking for graduates to come in and fill sometimes a contract position, sometimes something like that can lead into a full-time position. But we're on that sort of radar. And then obviously as well, with our broader institutional connections, we can point students towards the opportunities that arise. So yes, having, you know, understanding the history of art in its broadest terms, and having a subject specialism, be it modern or early modern or contemporary, will identify the particular kind of auction house or collections that you might be able to contribute to at a commercial level. But those kind of research skills, the sort of understanding of the field, is what we're equipping students with.
Okay, that's great. And I'm just going to put your email address there in the chat box. So if anyone has any queries, they can go email you directly.
Absolutely.
Another question just in, Conor, would you recommend a place of employment for a graduate in art history before joining the Masters?
Yeah, no, we don't recommend that students have any prior experience in working in collections or in a gallery or a museum context at all. In fact, you know, there's always a cohort that comes straight through from the undergraduate program, and that is across the board. I mean, that would be across Ireland and the EU and the US. We often, I mean, as Grace mentioned, our student cohort is increasingly international. So students come from varying backgrounds. No, that wouldn't be essential at all. I mean, if you have experience in a local museum or a gallery, that might, I suppose, give you some idea of the particular focus or direction you might want to go in. And, you know, armed with that, you might be able to use that in terms of how you navigate the modules on this program, but it's certainly not essential, no.
And a few questions in just around that, selecting modules. One is, will you be holding any taster lectures at any stage? And 2, is there an opportunity to attend lectures before choosing which electives to take? And in light of the raised awareness of the Black Lives Matter movement, are there any plans to offer courses or modules regarding post-colonial history in architecture and art and things like that?
Okay, that's a lot of questions in there. We don't have electives. The students don't have an opportunity to choose the taught modules. They are part of a set program. That's the first part, I think, answered. In terms of post-colonial issues, that's very much a part of what we teach. So I teach the Advanced Art History methodology course. One of the seminars is on post-colonialism, and that's certainly something that we tackle. Readings by Edward Said, Homi Bhabha, and others who challenge the very nature of collections and things that have formed in the past and the different kind of ethical dimensions to that. But those kind of post-colonial things also creep into other modules where you may or may not expect them. So for example, the module on 17th century Dutch collecting in institutions and private collections also takes into account the Dutch interest in the West Indies, for example, and the impact of that on that kind of capital and money and flow of ideas that comes between that sort of wider European interest in the Atlantic world. So those kind of ideas are very much threaded through. We don't currently have a course devoted to that, but as I said, those kind of ideas certainly inform the kind of intellectual backdrop to the course. And again, when our student trip is planned for Berlin, so when you're walking around the museums in Berlin, you're encountering collections that were often formed in very kind of questionable circumstances, certainly by today's standards. And there are ideas that we will discuss as a group and chew over those kind of ideas with the student group.
That sounds great. And 2 very quick final questions. Do you have any taster lectures that students could look at online or elsewhere?
We don't currently. I mean, that's certainly something we could look into. I suppose we're adjusting to the idea of delivering courses online. It's certainly been a learning curve for us in the last couple of months, but that's something we could certainly look into.
And just to check around part-time options, are you offering a part-time this year?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. There is a part-time option. There are some restrictions on the part-time option between EU and non-EU students. So the part-time option, to the best of my knowledge, is available only to the EU cohort. And the non-EU students are obliged to take the full year program. And that's to do with issues beyond UCD's control.
Okay, that's great. And roughly what is the percentage of part-time versus full-time students?
Oh, it's very small. Most of the students take the full-time option. We currently have 3 students in the part-time option, one of whom is in their second year and the other 2 are in their first year. So there's always a little bit of overlap with that. So we've currently 3 as opposed to 12 full-time students.
Okay, that's great. Well, on that note, we'll close out this session. Thank you very much, Conor, and thank you very much, Grace, for joining us here today. And to all of you at home who have joined us, you're very good. Thanks a million.